A broke student helped a lost tourist find his way, not knowing he was a millionaire in disguise. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emily had always been a dedicated student, doing whatever she could to make ends meet. Her days were filled with endless studying, working part-time jobs, and trying to stay on top of her expenses. It wasn't easy being broke in a big city, but she managed to push through. On one particularly rainy day, after a long, exhausting class, Emily was walking down the street, trying to get to the bus stop. Her clothes were worn, and her shoes were soaked through from the relentless rain. The sound of the city's hustle and bustle faded into the background as she hurried along, feeling the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her. As she neared the bus stop, she noticed a man standing near the entrance of a small cafe, looking completely out of place. He was tall, with disheveled hair and a faded jacket, his eyes scanning the surroundings in a way that made it clear he was lost. He looked like someone who didn't quite belong here. He was a tourist, clearly trying to figure out how to get around. Emily, always the helpful soul, approached him. "Hey, can I help you with something?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth despite the chill of the rain. The man looked up, his expression initially startled but then softening when he saw the sincerity in her eyes. "Oh, thank you. I'm trying to get to the downtown area, but I'm completely lost," he explained in a thick accent. Emily smiled, glad to help. "I can show you the way. It's not far from here. Just follow me," she said, motioning for him to walk alongside her. As they walked, they talked about small things, her classes, his travels, and life in the city. The man, whose name was David, listened intently and seemed genuinely interested in everything she said. Emily couldn't help but notice how kind he seemed, but she had no idea just how much he was hiding behind that humble exterior. They reached the downtown area, and she pointed him in the direction of his destination. "You'll find it just a few blocks down," she said, giving him one last smile. "Thanks again," David said, reaching into his pocket. "Let me at least pay you for your time." But Emily quickly shook her head. No need for that. "It was my pleasure," she insisted, feeling embarrassed by the offer. David paused for a moment, then nodded, clearly respecting her wishes. "You're very kind. I hope you don't regret helping me." With that, he turned and walked off, leaving Emily standing there, a little confused but mostly just happy to have helped. Little did she know, that simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. David wasn't just any tourist, he was a millionaire in disguise, a man who had spent most of his life hiding his wealth to see if people would treat him for who he truly was, not for his money. And Emily, a broke student with a heart of gold, had unknowingly passed his test. After helping the lost tourist, Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. She found herself replaying the conversation they had shared, the way he had looked at her with such gratitude and sincerity. She wondered if she'd ever see him again. But life, as always, was relentless. The following days were filled with more work, more studying, and the ever-present weight of her financial struggles. It seemed like the world kept piling on more challenges with no way out. Emily was trying her best to stay positive, but each passing day made it harder. One evening, after a grueling shift at the cafe, Emily walked home through the rain, her mind weighed down by the mounting bills she couldn't pay and the looming fear of losing her place to stay. As she turned the corner, a familiar face caught her eye. It was David, standing near the corner of the street, looking lost in thought. He seemed out of place here, as if the world around him was moving too quickly for him to keep up. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was the same man. But then, their eyes met. A smile spread across his face, and he waved. "Hey, it's you," he called out. Emily smiled back, feeling a little awkward but pleased to see him again. "Hi, I didn't expect to run into you here," she said, stepping closer. "Yeah, I wasn't sure where I was headed either," David replied, chuckling. "Can I walk you home? I owe you for the other day." Emily's first instinct was to politely decline, but there was something in David's voice that made her reconsider. Maybe he was just being kind, maybe he really did want to repay her in some way. She nodded. Sure, why not? They started walking together down the street. As they walked, the rain continued to fall, but it didn't feel as heavy now. The sound of their footsteps on the wet pavement filled the silence between them. Emily found herself talking more than usual, telling David about her classes, her dreams, and the struggle she faced trying to make a life for herself in the city. David listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, and offering words of encouragement. Emily had to admit, there was something about him that made her feel at ease. It wasn't just the fact that he was offering to help her. It was the way he made her feel seen, heard, like she mattered. When they finally reached her apartment building, Emily felt a strange sense of disappointment. She didn't want their time together to end so soon. But she also knew she couldn't let herself get too attached. After all, he was a stranger to her. "Thanks for walking me home," she said, glancing at him. "I really appreciate it." David smiled. "Of course. I'm glad I could help. I'll let you get inside. But if you ever need anything, just let me know." Emily nodded, surprised by his offer. She wasn't used to people being so open and generous, especially when she didn't expect anything in return. She gave him a small smile before turning to head inside. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard his voice again. "Hey, Emily," David called softly. She turned around. "Yeah?" "I'm serious," he said, his expression serious now. "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. You've got more potential than you know." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever said something like that to her before. It made her feel seen, valued in a way that was rare. She smiled again, this time more genuinely. "Thanks, David," she said, her voice softer. "I'll keep that in mind." As the door closed behind her, Emily leaned against it, trying to process the unexpected kindness she had just experienced. It felt like something had shifted in her life, and she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything for her. Emily woke up the next morning, the sunlight creeping through her window, casting a warm glow over the room. It was another day in the hustle of her life, but something felt different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the memory of David lingered in her mind, his words of encouragement still echoing in her head. "You've got more potential than you know." It was strange, feeling this way. It wasn't like her to think too much about a stranger, but David wasn't just any person. There was something about him that felt real, genuine. She shook off the feeling, knowing she had to focus. Another long day of studying and working awaited her. Emily spent the next few hours buried in her textbooks, trying to ignore the weight of her financial struggles. Her part-time job at the cafe barely covered her bills, and her dreams of becoming a successful artist seemed farther away with each passing day. By the time she clocked out from work, the sun had long set, and she was exhausted. She grabbed her coat and headed out into the cold night, hoping the walk home would clear her head. As she walked down the street, her thoughts drifted back to David, wondering what he was doing. Was he really as nice as he seemed, or was it all just a facade? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. Emily hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Hi Emily, it's David. I hope you're doing well. I was thinking about you and wanted to invite you to lunch tomorrow. No pressure, just a friendly offer. Let me know if you're free." Emily stared at the message, her heart skipping a beat. Was this really happening? David wanted to see her again? She couldn't help but smile, but at the same time, a sense of uncertainty crept in. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but something about his message felt different from anything she had experienced before. After a few minutes of deliberating, she typed back a simple reply, "I'd love to, thank you for the offer." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The next day, Emily found herself nervously waiting at a small cafe, the one she had passed the other day when she met David. She was early, unsure of what to expect. When David walked in, a smile spread across his face as he spotted her sitting at a table by the window. He walked over, looking just as charming as before, but there was something different about him now, something that made Emily feel like she was seeing him for the first time. He greeted her warmly, and they sat down, the conversation flowing easily. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and their struggles. David listened intently, asking questions that showed he was truly interested in what she had to say. Emily couldn't help but feel at ease around him, as though she had known him for much longer than she really had. As they talked, Emily felt a strange connection with him, something deeper than what she had experienced with anyone else. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to David than he was letting on. She had already learned that he wasn't just some lost tourist, he had money, power, and influence. She wondered why someone like him would want to spend time with someone like her, someone struggling to make ends meet. The thought made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't help the way her heart raced when he smiled at her. After lunch, they walked around the city, chatting and laughing. David seemed so different from anyone she had ever met, and Emily found herself enjoying his company more than she expected. But there was still something holding her back, something she couldn't quite place. She felt like she was on the edge of something big, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Later that evening, as Emily sat in her small apartment, she reflected on the day. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, confusion, and doubt. She knew that meeting David had changed something in her, but she wasn't sure if it was a change for the better. She had to remind herself that he was still a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. And yet, deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, Emily received another message from David. "Hey, I had a great time today. Would you like to meet again soon?" She smiled at the screen, feeling her heart flutter. She hadn't expected this, but part of her was hoping for it. The other part of her, the part that had been burned too many times before, was hesitant. She took a deep breath, tapping out a response. "I'd like that, David." As she hit send, she couldn't help but wonder just how much this man, this stranger, would end up meaning to her. Little did she know, David's world was about to collide with hers in ways neither of them could have predicted. After their lunch date, Emily couldn't stop thinking about David. She found herself replaying their conversations in her mind, recalling how natural everything had felt between them. He was kind, genuine, and easy to talk to, but there was still something about him that she couldn't quite understand. As the days passed, they continued to meet up, often at the same small cafe where they had shared their first lunch. Each time, the conversations became more personal, more meaningful. They talked about their dreams, their pasts, and what they wanted from life. But despite the growing connection, Emily still felt a sense of unease. There was a part of her that wondered if David's kindness was too good to be true, if there was something he wasn't telling her. She knew she was falling for him, but she also knew that she couldn't afford to be naive. One evening, as Emily was finishing her shift at the cafe, she received another message from David. "Hey, Emily. I was wondering if you'd like to go to a charity event with me this weekend. It's for a good cause, and I think it could be fun. Let me know what you think." Emily stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. She had never been to an event like that before, and the idea of attending with David made her feel both excited and nervous. She hesitated for a moment before typing back, "That sounds like fun. I'd love to go." David's response was quick. "Great. I'll pick you up at 7 on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it." Saturday night arrived, and Emily found herself standing in front of her closet, trying to figure out what to wear. She didn't own anything fancy, so she settled for a simple black dress she had worn to a few family gatherings. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. When David arrived at her apartment to pick her up, he looked nothing short of handsome in a sharp suit that made him stand out even more. Emily felt self-conscious as he complimented her on how she looked, but she smiled and thanked him, trying to hide her nerves. The event was held at a luxurious venue, with guests dressed in elegant attire, and the atmosphere was nothing like anything Emily had ever experienced. As they entered the hall, she couldn't help but feel out of place. The lights were dim, casting a golden glow over the crowd, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. People mingled around, laughing and exchanging business cards, while Emily and David made their way to the cocktail area. David introduced her to several people, and though she tried to fit in, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was a fish out of water. Everyone seemed so polished and confident, and she felt like she didn't belong. But David was there, guiding her through it, making sure she felt comfortable. He never once left her side, and his easygoing demeanor made her feel more at ease. As the night went on, Emily began to relax. She even found herself laughing at the jokes of a few of David's friends, and for the first time in a while, she felt like she was truly enjoying herself. But just as she was starting to feel like she belonged, the announcement came. The host of the event stepped up to the microphone, introducing David as one of the main sponsors of the evening. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she looked at David. Her eyes wide with surprise. She hadn't known he was involved with such a high-profile event, let alone a sponsor. As he stood up to take the stage, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. David had always been humble about his life and his work, never once mentioning his wealth or his connections. But here, in front of an entire room of influential people, he stood tall, confident, and in control. As he spoke about the charity and its mission, Emily felt a mix of admiration and confusion. She realized just how little she knew about his life, about who he really was. And yet, despite everything, she couldn't help but be drawn to him. When he finished speaking, David returned to her side, and she could see the warmth in his smile. "I didn't mean to surprise you," he said, a little sheepishly. "I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I prefer to keep things simple." Emily smiled, feeling both relieved and more confused than ever. "You're full of surprises, David," she said softly. "But I'm glad you invited me tonight. It's been a wonderful experience." As the night came to a close, they left the venue together, and Emily found herself deep in thought. She had never expected David to be so involved in the world of business and philanthropy, but it only made her realize just how much she still had to learn about him. She felt a growing curiosity, mixed with a sense of uncertainty. Who was David really? And what did this all mean for her? The night had left her with more questions than answers, but one thing was for sure: her life was changing, and she couldn't quite figure out where it was leading her. The days following the charity event left Emily with a whirlwind of emotions, and she couldn't help but replay the night over and over in her head. David had surprised her again, but this time, it wasn't just his hidden wealth or influence that took her by surprise. It was the connection they shared, the way he made her feel seen and valued, even in a room full of high-powered individuals. She had always been a little skeptical of people who had money, and the world they inhabited felt so foreign to her. But David, he was different. He didn't fit the mold of the typical millionaire, the one who flaunted their wealth or treated people differently. Instead, he was humble, kind, and made her feel as though her dreams and struggles mattered. It made her question everything she thought she knew about people with money. Was it possible for someone so successful to be so down to earth? The more she thought about it, the more Emily found herself drawn to him. But there was still a barrier between them, his secret. She didn't know the full story of who he was or what motivated him, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling her, something important. It wasn't until a week later that she finally got her answer. It was a Friday evening when she received a call from David. "Hey Emily, how about dinner tonight? There's a new restaurant in town I've been wanting to try. Would you like to join me?" The invitation was casual, but Emily could tell from the tone of his voice that he was eager to see her again. She hesitated for a moment, still unsure about how much of herself she should reveal. But something inside her urged her to go. She needed answers, and maybe this would be the chance to get them. "I'd love to," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "What time should I be ready?" "I'll pick you up at 7, he said, his voice warm and reassuring. As the night approached, Emily found herself pacing around her apartment, nervous for reasons she couldn't entirely explain. She hadn't been on many dates, especially not with someone like David. She wanted to make a good impression, but she also wanted to make sure she wasn't getting caught up in something that wasn't real. When David arrived at her apartment, he was as charming as always. He looked relaxed in a casual outfit, but still effortlessly handsome. Emily felt a twinge of nervousness as she opened the door, but his smile put her at ease. "You look beautiful, Emily," he said, his voice sincere. "Thanks for joining me tonight." She smiled back, her heart racing a little. "Thank you, David. You look great too." As they drove to the restaurant, the conversation flowed easily between them. It was the same comfortable rhythm they had shared before. But this time, Emily couldn't ignore the question in the back of her mind. What was he really hiding? When they arrived at the restaurant, it was just as upscale as the charity event. The atmosphere was intimate, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. The waiter led them to their table, and they sat down, still chatting about everything and nothing at all. As they ordered their food, Emily's mind wandered. She had already decided that she needed to ask David the question that had been bothering her for weeks. Why had he kept his true identity hidden? Why had he chosen to spend time with someone like her? After they had finished their appetizers, Emily took a deep breath. "David," she began, her voice steady but her heart pounding, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" David looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. He set down his glass of wine, and then, in a calm but serious tone, he answered, "I didn't want you to see me as just a millionaire. I didn't want that to be the reason you wanted to spend time with me." Emily blinked, surprised by his honesty. "But I still don't understand," she said softly. "You've been so kind to me, but you're not exactly normal." David chuckled, a small, self-deprecating smile forming on his lips. "No, I'm not. But that's why I wanted to get to know you as a person first. I didn't want you to think I was just another guy with money who was trying to impress you." Emily absorbed his words, her mind racing. "But why me?" she asked, feeling a little vulnerable. "Why did you pick me?" David's smile softened, and he leaned forward slightly, looking directly into her eyes. "Because you're real. You don't care about the money, you care about who I am. And that means everything to me." His words hit her like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of clarity. David wasn't just some rich guy trying to find someone to impress, he was someone who genuinely cared. And in that moment, she realized that she had been so focused on his wealth and status that she had almost missed the person sitting across from her. "I had no idea," she said, her voice quiet, but full of emotion. "I didn't realize how much I was holding back. I've been so scared of being hurt, of not being enough." David reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "You are more than enough, Emily," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I see you for who you truly are. And I hope you can see me the same way." Emily's heart swelled with emotion, and in that moment, everything clicked. She wasn't just falling for him because of his wealth or status, she was falling for him because of the man he truly was. And maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something real. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she looked into David's eyes. The tension she had been carrying for weeks seemed to dissipate in that moment, replaced by something deeper, trust. She had been so focused on the differences between them, the wealth, the power, the world he came from, that she hadn't realized what really mattered, the connection they shared. She squeezed his hand, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad we talked about this," she said softly. David nodded, his expression warm. "Me too," he replied. I don't want any secrets between us. Their conversation lingered in the air long after the meal was over. As they left the restaurant, walking side by side in the crisp night air, Emily felt like the world had shifted. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. David had opened up to her, and she had done the same. It felt real, and that was all that mattered. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened. They spent more time together, both in casual settings and at events that David invited her to. Emily found herself enjoying the life she once thought was out of reach. She got used to the glamorous dinners, the charity events, and the conversations with people who were at the top of their fields. But despite all of this, David never once made her feel out of place. He made her feel like she belonged. Yet, there was still something about him that made her curious. He had revealed so much about his life, but there were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. One night, after a particularly lavish gala, Emily found herself alone with David in the back of a limousine, heading home. She turned to him, her curiosity getting the best of her. "David, you've told me so much about your work, your charity, your family, but there's still one thing I don't understand." David raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smile. "What's that?" he asked, clearly intrigued. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but why me? Out of all the people you could have spent time with, why did you choose me?" David's expression softened, and for a moment, he was silent. Emily could see the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Because you're real," he said finally, his voice steady. "You don't treat me like I'm just my bank account or my status. You see me for who I am, not what I have. That's rare. And it's something I've always wanted." Emily blinked, surprised by his honesty. "But I'm just a student. I don't have the kind of life you're used to," she said, almost defensively. "That's exactly it," David replied, his tone gentle. "You don't live for status, or to impress people. You live for yourself, for your dreams. And that's something I admire." His words hit her in a way she didn't expect. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't fit in with people who had money or power, but David didn't see her as an outsider. He saw her as someone worth investing in, someone worth caring about. The realization made her heart swell, but at the same time, doubt crept in. Could she really be enough for him? Could they have a future together, despite their differences? She looked out the window of the limo, her thoughts swirling. "I'm not used to this," she admitted quietly. "To people like you, and this kind of life." David's voice was soft, reassuring. "You don't have to get used to anything. You just have to be yourself. That's what I love about you. You don't pretend to be someone you're not." Emily turned to face him, her heart racing. "But what about you? You could have anyone, David. Why me?" David smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Because I'm tired of pretending. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else expected me to be. But with you, I don't have to. I can just be me." His words lingered in the air, and Emily found herself overwhelmed by the depth of his sincerity. She had been afraid of being hurt, afraid that this was all just a dream. But David's honesty was like a balm to her worries. "I'm not used to someone being so open with me," Emily said, her voice shaking a little. "But it feels good. It feels real." David reached over and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing across her skin. "Then let's keep it real, Emily. Let's not overthink it. Let's just see where this goes." She smiled, the weight of her doubts lifting. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe, like everything would be okay. As the limo continued its journey through the city, Emily leaned back in her seat, her heart full. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, with David by her side, she felt like she could face anything. And maybe, just maybe, they were on the path to something more than either of them had expected. As the days went on, Emily felt her connection with David growing stronger. They spent more time together, their conversations deepening, and with each passing moment, Emily felt like she was discovering a new side of him. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something he wasn't telling her, something important. Despite how open he had been with her about his past and his family, there was a part of his life he kept hidden. One evening, after a quiet dinner, they were walking through the city, the cool breeze brushing against their faces as they strolled down the streets. It was just like any other evening, except Emily couldn't stop thinking about the unease that had been bubbling up inside her. "David," she said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us." David turned his head toward her, his expression soft and inviting. "What about us?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "It's just, you've told me so much, but I feel like there's still something you're keeping from me. Something you're not saying." David stopped walking for a moment, his hand gently squeezing hers. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, Emily saw something flicker in his gaze, a mix of hesitation and something else she couldn't quite place. "I've been trying to be as honest with you as I can," he said quietly. "But there's a part of me, a part of my life, that I've been afraid to share." Emily felt her heart race at his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if weighing his words carefully. "I've never wanted my wealth or my status to define me, and I didn't want it to be the reason you spent time with me. But I think it's time you knew the whole truth. I'm not just a businessman or a philanthropist. I come from a family that's been in the business world for generations, and they have expectations for me. Things I can't avoid, no matter how much I try to live my own life." Emily's heart sank as she listened. She had suspected there was something deeper to his story, but she hadn't anticipated this. "What kind of expectations?" she asked softly, her mind racing. David's gaze softened, and he took a step closer to her. "My family expects me to take over the company, to follow in my father's footsteps. They've planned my life for me since I was a child, and sometimes, I feel like I'm just a pawn in their game. I've been trying to break free from all that, to live life on my own terms, but it's not easy." Emily stood there, processing his words. She could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him. It made sense now, the walls he had built, the careful way he had kept his distance. "David, I don't know what to say," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined you were dealing with all of that. I just wanted to know you for who you are, not because of what your family wants from you." David smiled faintly, his expression softening. "I know, Emily. That's why I've kept this from you. I didn't want you to think I was just some privileged guy trying to impress you. But I can't keep hiding this from you, not anymore. You deserve to know the truth." Emily reached out and gently touched his arm, her heart aching for him. "You don't have to apologize, David. I'm glad you told me. I don't want you to feel like you have to live up to some perfect image for me. I want you to be you. The real you." He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. That means more to me than you know." For a long moment, they stood there, the world around them fading as they shared an unspoken understanding. Emily realized that the truth was complicated, but it didn't change how she felt about him. She wasn't in love with his wealth or his family's legacy, she was in love with him, the person he was, the man who had opened up to her and shown her sides of himself she hadn't expected. "What happens now?" Emily asked quietly, her gaze fixed on him. David smiled, his eyes glinting with something like hope. "Now, we take things one step at a time. We keep being honest with each other. And we see where this journey takes us." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with warmth. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had never felt more certain that she wanted to be with David, not because of his wealth or family, but because of the man he had shown her he could be. And that was all that mattered. In the days that followed their heartfelt conversation, Emily found herself navigating a sea of emotions. David's confession about his family and the weight of his responsibilities had left her both shaken and moved. She hadn't expected his truth to be so complicated, but in a way, it made her feel closer to him. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that his vulnerability, the way he opened up to her, was a testament to how much he trusted her. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could trust him completely. However, there was a new layer of tension in the air. Emily had always been independent, relying on herself to get by, and the idea of being involved in someone else's world, especially someone as influential as David, was both thrilling and intimidating. She had spent most of her life fighting against the odds, trying to carve out a future for herself in a city that often felt indifferent to her struggles. But David had shown her a world she never thought she'd be part of, a world of power, influence, and privilege. It wasn't something she had ever aspired to, but now that she was stepping into it, she wasn't sure where she fit. One night, as they sat together on the couch in David's apartment, a familiar feeling crept into Emily's chest: doubt. She had been here many times before, feeling like she was on the verge of something big, but unsure if she truly belonged. David noticed the shift in her demeanor almost immediately. "You've been quiet tonight," he said, his voice gentle. "What's on your mind?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then looked up at him. "I don't know, David. I've just been thinking a lot about everything. About us, about the future. I don't want to be a part of your world just because of who you are. I want to be with you, but I don't want to lose myself in all of this," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. David was silent for a moment, his gaze soft as he took in her words. Then, he reached out and gently took her hand in his. "Emily," he began, his voice steady, "I don't want you to lose yourself. I never have. The last thing I want is for you to feel like you have to change for me, or for my world. I'm here with you because of who you are, not because of anything else." His words settled into her heart, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a sense of peace. David wasn't asking her to become someone else. He was asking her to be herself, to bring her own unique light into his life. "I know it's not easy," he continued, "but if we're going to make this work, we need to trust each other completely. And I trust you, Emily. I trust you more than I've trusted anyone." Emily looked into his eyes, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. She had always been guarded, afraid of being vulnerable, but with David, it felt different. She felt safe. "I want to trust you, too," she said softly. "I want to be with you, but I need to figure out how to do that without losing who I am." David nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And I'll be here, every step of the way," he said. "We'll figure it out together." The reassurance in his voice gave Emily the confidence to breathe a little easier. She didn't have all the answers, and the path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. David was right: if they were going to make this work, it would require trust, patience, and an understanding of who they were as individuals. The next few days passed by in a blur of quiet moments, deep conversations, and laughter. They continued to spend time together, enjoying each other's company without the pressure of expectations or pretenses. Slowly, Emily began to feel more comfortable in this new world, realizing that she didn't have to change who she was to fit into David's life. In fact, it was her authenticity, her kindness, and her strength that made her stand out to him in the first place. One evening, as they sat together in the park, watching the sunset, Emily finally spoke up again. "I've been thinking about everything," she said, her voice filled with a sense of clarity. "And I think I've figured it out. I don't need to be anyone else. I just need to be me. And I want to be with you, David, for who you are, not for anything else." David smiled, his eyes lighting up with warmth. "That's all I've ever wanted, Emily," he said, squeezing her hand. "To be with you for you." The weight of their previous doubts and fears seemed to lift as they sat there together, side by side. Emily realized that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's world, it was about finding a way to build your own world together, one that allowed both of you to grow, to be authentic, and to trust each other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily knew that whatever the future held, she was ready to face it with David by her side. The weeks after their heartfelt conversation brought a sense of calm between Emily and David. She had stopped overthinking, stopped worrying about what she should be or who she should impress. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to just be with David, be in the moment, and embrace everything their relationship was becoming. They continued to explore their connection, going on small dates, taking long walks in the city, and even spending quiet evenings at home, enjoying each other's company without the pressure of anything more. As Emily settled into her new life, she found herself growing more confident, not just in her relationship with David, but in herself. She realized that she had spent too much time doubting her worth, measuring herself against expectations she thought she had to meet. David had never once made her feel inadequate or like she didn't belong. His support and kindness helped her see that she was more than enough, just as she was. One afternoon, as they sat together in the cafe, sipping coffee and chatting about their plans for the weekend, Emily noticed something was different about David. He was quieter than usual, his gaze distant. She couldn't help but feel a shift in the air, a subtle change in his mood. "David, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. He looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips, but there was something in his eyes that didn't match his smile. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, but Emily wasn't convinced. She knew him too well by now to miss the signs of something weighing on him. "You're not fine." "What's going on?" she pressed gently. David sighed, running a hand through his hair, his expression serious. "It's just everything," he said, his voice low. "I've been trying to balance this life with you, with my family's expectations, and it's starting to feel like I'm losing control of everything." Emily listened carefully, her heart aching as she saw the burden David carried. "What do you mean?" "Losing control of what?" she asked, her hand gently reaching out to him. David hesitated before speaking again, as though the words were difficult to form. "I've been offered a major role in the family business. My father wants me to take over. It's a huge responsibility, and to be honest, it feels like a trap. The last thing I want is to become someone I'm not, someone who just follows orders and lives by other people's rules." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew David had been struggling with his family's pressure, but hearing it laid out so plainly made it feel all the more real. She could see the inner conflict in him, the tug-of-war between the life he wanted to build for himself and the legacy his family expected him to uphold. "David, I can't even imagine how hard that must be," Emily said, her voice soft but filled with empathy. "But you don't have to go through this alone. We're in this together, right?" David looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if seeking reassurance. "I want to believe that, I really do," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "But I don't know if I can escape it. It feels like no matter what I do, my family will always be there, pushing me in a direction I don't want to go. And I don't want to drag you into all of this. I don't want you to have to deal with my mess." Emily shook her head, refusing to accept his words. "David, this isn't just your mess. It's our mess now. We're partners in this, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to do everything alone. We'll figure it out together." David smiled faintly, but there was still uncertainty in his eyes. "But what if I fail? What if I disappoint you? I don't want you to think I'm weak, or that I can't handle my own life." Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. "David, strength isn't about never having doubts or struggles. It's about facing them, about not letting them define who you are. I believe in you, and I believe in us. Whatever happens with your family or the business, I'm here for you. And I'm not going anywhere." Her words were a balm to his troubled heart. For the first time in days, David's shoulders relaxed, the weight of his worries lifting just a little. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve you, but I'm so grateful you're here." Emily reached out, placing her hand over his. "You don't have to be perfect, David. You just have to be you. And that's more than enough for me." They sat there for a moment, the world around them fading as they shared a quiet understanding. Emily knew that their journey wasn't going to be easy. There would be more obstacles ahead, more moments of doubt and fear. But in that moment, she felt certain that They could face anything together. With David by her side, she wasn't afraid of what the future held. Whatever came their way, they would navigate it as a team. As they left the cafe, hand in hand, Emily realized that the road ahead might be uncertain, but the love and trust they had built were more than enough to carry them through. Days passed, and the quiet promise they had made to face whatever challenges came their way together became their guiding force. Emily and David found their rhythm, balancing their lives, their growing relationship, and the uncertainty that still loomed over David's future. As much as they tried to enjoy their time together, the weight of David's family pressure and the looming role he was expected to take on in the family business never left him for long. Emily could see how much it affected him. There were days when he was distant, retreating into himself, and though he tried to hide it, Emily knew something was weighing on him. One evening, after a quiet dinner at her apartment, she decided to bring it up. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but concerned. David looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. "About what?" he asked, setting his fork down. Emily took a deep breath. "I can tell something's been bothering you. I know it's the pressure from your family, and I know how much it's affecting you. But you don't have to carry all of this by yourself." David looked at her, his eyes softening. "I don't want to drag you into it, Emily. You've got your own life, your own dreams. I don't want you to be a part of this mess." Emily shook her head firmly. "It's not a mess, David. It's part of your life, and I'm a part of your life. We're in this together. I want to help, I want to support you. But you have to let me in." David was silent for a moment, clearly torn. He ran his hand through his hair as though he were trying to find the right words. "I don't know how to make this work. I'm supposed to follow in my father's footsteps, take over the family business, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I want that life." Emily leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Then don't do it. Don't do something you don't want to do. I know it's hard, and I know it's complicated, but you don't have to live your life for anyone else, David. You have a choice." David's gaze met hers, and for the first time in what felt like ages, he seemed to truly hear her. "I've spent my whole life doing what my family wants," he said quietly. "I've always felt like I had to be this perfect son, the perfect heir to the business. But I don't know if that's who I am. I don't know if I can keep pretending." Emily reached across the table, gently taking his hand in hers. "You don't have to pretend anymore, David. You're allowed to be yourself, to choose your own path. I'll be here, no matter what you decide. But you have to listen to your own heart." There was a long silence between them, and Emily could see the turmoil in David's eyes. He was a man caught between duty and desire, between what was expected of him and what he truly wanted. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to go against my family," David admitted, his voice raw with emotion. Emily squeezed his hand, her heart breaking for him. "You don't have to do it alone," she said softly. "You have me. We'll figure it out, step by step." David looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't deserve you, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've already done more for me than I can ever repay." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with love. "You don't have to repay me, David. I'm here because I want to be. And I believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself." David squeezed her hand, his expression softening. "Thank you, Emily," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't know what I would do without you." Emily leaned in, her lips brushing his cheek in a gentle kiss. "You don't have to find out," she said softly, her heart full. They sat there together in the quiet of the evening, the weight of their conversation still lingering in the air, but somehow, it felt lighter now. David had shared his burdens with her, and Emily had offered him the only thing she could, her love, her support, and the promise that they would face whatever came next together. The days that followed brought more clarity for David. He began to understand that he didn't have to live his life according to his family's rules. He could choose his own path, with Emily by his side, and that realization brought him peace. As for Emily, she knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it would be worth it. They had built something strong, something real, and together, they were ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. The days that followed felt like a breath of fresh air for both Emily and David. The weight of their previous conversations had lifted, and they were finding a new sense of balance in their relationship. David had started to distance himself from the constant pressure of his family, and Emily had continued to support him, offering the reassurance he needed without pushing him to make decisions he wasn't ready for. It wasn't an easy path, but it was theirs to walk together. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of David's apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. She had always been a bit of a dreamer, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like her dreams weren't out of reach. "David, do you ever think about what's next?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. He turned his head to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. "I mean, now that you've made the decision to step away from the family business, what's next for you? What do you want to do?" Emily's voice was gentle, but there was a deep curiosity in her words. David paused, looking out over the city for a long moment before turning back to her. "Honestly, I don't know yet," he admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. "It feels like I've been living in other people's shadows for so long, I'm not sure what I'm meant to do with my life now." Emily nodded, understanding the complexity of his feelings. "I think that's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You've been so focused on what everyone else expects of you, maybe it's time to focus on what you want. You have the chance to reinvent yourself, to create your own path." David looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You're right," he said, his voice soft. "It's just a little scary. For so long, I've been defined by my family, by their expectations, and now, it's like I'm standing at the edge of something new, something unknown. But I'm not sure how to take that first step." Emily reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. "You don't have to do it alone," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "Whatever you decide to do, I'll be right here beside you, every step of the way. We'll figure it out together." David squeezed her hand, his eyes softening with appreciation. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could do this without you." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. "You're never alone, David. We're in this together. Always." That night, as they lay together, David's words lingered in Emily's mind. She could feel the weight of the unknown pressing on him, but she also knew that he had the strength to find his way. It wasn't going to be easy, but she believed in him. She believed in them. The next morning, David woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. The weight of his family's expectations no longer felt suffocating. Instead of running from his responsibilities, he realized he could approach them on his own terms. It was the first step toward truly living his life for himself. Emily, ever supportive, encouraged him to take the time he needed to figure out his next move. There was no rush. Together, they would build something new, something that belonged to both of them. A few weeks later, David made a bold decision. He had been offered a position at a tech startup, one that aligned with his passion for innovation and entrepreneurship. It wasn't the family business, but it was something he could be proud of. It was his choice, his chance to create something on his own. Emily was thrilled for him, even though she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. But she also knew this was the right decision for him. "I'm proud of you," Emily said, her voice full of encouragement. "This is a big step, but I know you're going to do amazing things." David smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." As they embraced, Emily realized just how far they had come. From the first awkward meeting, to the deep conversations, to the moment when David finally took control of his own future, it had all led them to this point. Their relationship had grown stronger, and together, they had built a foundation of trust, love, and unwavering support. As David embarked on his new journey, Emily was there beside him, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road would not always be smooth, but with each other, they were unstoppable. They had learned the most important lesson, that the path to happiness wasn't about living up to other people's expectations. It was about being true to themselves and walking together toward a future they both could shape. And for the first time in a long time, David felt free. Free to pursue his dreams, free to love without fear, and free to create a life that was truly his own. Months passed, and with each passing day, David felt more confident in his decision to break away from the life his family had planned for him. He had settled into his new role at the tech startup, finding a sense of purpose and excitement that he hadn't felt in years. It was challenging, but he was doing something he loved, something that felt right. Emily stood by him every step of the way, her unwavering support giving him the strength to face the obstacles that came with this new chapter in his life. They spent more time together, sharing quiet evenings and laughter, building a life that was theirs to create. Despite the challenges, David had never been happier. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Emily looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You've come so far," she said softly. "I can see how much you've grown, how much you've changed. It makes me so proud of you." David smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his voice full of sincerity. "You've been my rock, Emily. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Emily reached out and took his hand, her fingers gently intertwining with his. "And I'll always believe in you," she said, her voice steady and full of warmth. "You've shown me so much about strength and perseverance. You've proven that it's never too late to take control of your life and make it your own." David looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've been a huge part of that. You've helped me see what really matters, what I really want out of life. And I can't thank you enough for that." There was a moment of silence between them, a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. Emily smiled softly, her heart full of love for the man beside her. "I think we've both come a long way," she said quietly. "We've both faced our fears and made choices that have brought us closer together." David nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "And we've learned that it's not about living up to someone else's expectations. It's about being true to ourselves and each other." Emily leaned in and kissed him gently on the cheek, her heart swelling with emotion. "Exactly," she whispered. "And no matter what happens next, we'll face it together. We've built something real, David. Something worth fighting for." David smiled, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I couldn't agree more," he said softly. "This is just the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side." As the weeks went by, David continued to grow into his new role, his confidence and determination becoming even more apparent. He was no longer the man torn between family expectations and personal desires. He had found his own path, and he was carving out a future that felt right. Emily, too, had found her own strength. She had been through so much, and now, with David by her side, she felt like anything was possible. Together, they had faced the unknown and come out stronger on the other side. Their relationship had grown, evolving into something deeper, something built on trust, respect, and a love that neither of them had expected but both had always dreamed of. One day, as they walked through the park, hand in hand, David stopped and turned to Emily, a smile playing on his lips. "I think it's time," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Time for what?" Emily asked, her heart racing. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a delicate ring, sparkling in the sunlight. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but filled with love, "you've made my life more than I ever imagined it could be. You've been my strength, my support, and my everything. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building a future together, facing whatever comes our way. Will you marry me?" Emily's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding as she looked at the ring, then at David. She had never imagined this moment, but now that it was happening, it felt like everything had fallen into place. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, David. Yes, I will marry you. David's face broke into a wide smile as he slid the ring onto her finger, his eyes shining with happiness. You've made me the happiest man in the world, he said softly. Emily smiled, her heart full of love and joy. No, she whispered, we've made each other the happiest people in the world. In that moment, everything felt right. They had built a life together, a life that was authentic and true to who they were. They had faced their fears, their doubts, and their challenges, and had come out stronger. The future was uncertain, but with each other by their side, they knew they could handle anything. As they walked off into the sunset, their hands intertwined, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together, a journey filled with love, laughter, and the promise of forever. It had been a year since that life-changing evening in the park, when David had asked Emily to marry him. The time had flown by, and in that year, they had both grown in ways they hadn't expected. David had fully embraced his new career path, the one he had chosen for himself, and his confidence had blossomed. Emily had continued her studies and had even started working part-time at a local art gallery, a dream she had quietly nurtured for years. Together, they had built a life that was meaningful and full of love, without the pressures of others' expectations. Their engagement had been everything they had hoped for, simple, heartfelt, and full of joy. The wedding was fast approaching, and as Emily sat on the edge of their bed, looking through a pile of wedding magazines, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. There was so much to think about, the venue, the flowers, the guest list, but more than anything, she was focused on the one thing that mattered most, her life with David. The thought of marrying him, of officially becoming his partner for life, filled her with a sense of peace and happiness that she couldn't explain. David walked into the room, a smile on his face as he looked at Emily. "How's the wedding planning going?" he asked, his voice warm and full of affection. Emily smiled up at him, setting the magazines aside. "It's going well. I think I'm getting the hang of it, but there's still so much to decide." David walked over to her, sitting down beside her on the bed. He took her hand in his, looking at her with a softness in his eyes. "Whatever we decide, I'm just happy we're doing this together. I don't care about the details as much as I care about marrying you," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Emily's heart swelled as she looked at him, feeling the depth of his love for her. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the beginning of our forever." As their wedding day drew nearer, Emily and David spent more time reflecting on their journey together. They had been through so much, David's decision to step away from his family's expectations, Emily's personal growth, and the way they had navigated their relationship through it all. They had built a solid foundation, one that was grounded in trust, respect, and love. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The morning of their wedding, Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the veil in her hair. She couldn't believe this day had finally arrived. The woman in the reflection looked different from the one who had walked into David's life a year ago, stronger, more confident, and full of hope. As she turned away from the mirror, she caught sight of her father, who was waiting just outside the door. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily smiled, her eyes misting over. "Thanks, Dad," she said, stepping toward him. "I'm nervous," she admitted. Her father's expression softened, and he took her hand in his. "I know you are, but you've got this," he said, his voice full of pride. "And remember, no matter what happens today, you're exactly where you're meant to be." Emily nodded, feeling the warmth of his words wash over her. She had always been close to her father, and today, as she prepared to marry the love of her life, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the support and guidance he had always given her. As she walked down the aisle, her heart pounded in her chest. She could see David standing at the altar, looking as handsome as ever. His eyes locked with hers, and the world seemed to fade away. In that moment, there was no one else in the room, just the two of them. As she reached the altar and took his hand, the look of love and admiration in his eyes made her heart swell. The officiant began the ceremony, but Emily barely heard the words. All she could focus on was the man standing beside her, the man she was about to marry. When it came time to exchange vows, Emily took a deep breath, feeling a rush of emotion. "David," she began, her voice steady but filled with love, "I promise to always stand by you, to support you, and to love you with everything I have. You've made my life more than I ever imagined it could be, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." David smiled, his eyes full of tears, and he took her hands in his. "Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I promise to always be by your side, to encourage your dreams, and to love you without reservation. You are my everything, and I am so incredibly lucky to have you in my life." The officiant declared them husband and wife, and as David leaned in to kiss her, Emily felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. They had made it through the uncertainty, the doubts, and the challenges. And now, standing together as husband and wife, they knew that the future was theirs to shape, together. As they walked down the aisle, hand in hand, Emily couldn't help but smile, knowing that their love had come full circle, from the moment they had met to this very day. And as they stepped into the future, they knew that no matter what, they would always have each other.